All right. Well, welcome everybody to the next of our success stories sessions. I am absolutely thrilled and honoured to introduce our next guest, someone that I am very luckily enough to be related to and able to have conversations with, but I'm very, very excited to learn more about in a professional sense. So I'd like to introduce you to Doug Bradley. Many of you will know Doug probably best from Hellraiser and the Pinhead role that he plays on that. I think everybody, whether you've seen the movies or not, recognise that horror image of Pinhead with the white face and the nails. I have to say, though, my favourite work of yours, Doug, is Nightbreed. It's one of my favourite movies of all time, and a big fan of that. And you've done everything from television right through to award-winning short horror stories, films like On Edge and Red Lines, animations, and you're done all sorts of different things. Inspector Morse always makes me smile, being such a Brit, and then your theatre work as well with your one-man show, An Evening with Death, which I think I'd still love to see, and of course, most recent thing that I've seen from you as well is your book, which is fantastic.
Well, that was actually, the book was published 20 years ago.
Oh, shush, don't tell me that.
Well, but it's still in print, it's still there, and it's still selling, so.
And it's an excellent read, I have to admit. I really.
Oh, good. Glad you enjoyed it. So what is our relation specifically? I never know how to.
I've tried to work this out so many times. So you are my father's cousin.
Son, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that makes you my cousin, either my cousin once removed or my second cousin. I'm never quite sure.
I never understand the definition of the removals.
No, well, I'm a geneticist, so I should really know these things, but I can never quite work out where these things go. So yeah, it's still a relation. I'd still call you a relation.
Yes, we'll settle for that.
Yeah. So, Doug, I think, a lot of people, we were saying just before we came on, that a lot of people would see you as the ultimate success in a lot of ways. You're what a lot of people aspire to, the movies, the books, the TV, the theatre. It's a very competitive industry, and it's hard to break. And I think a lot of people would see you as successful. Would you call yourself successful? Or how do you define success?
I assume I will give the same boring answer that almost all of your subjects, I suspect, would give you, which is I have no idea.
Exactly.
I do not know how you define success. And I think that's part of the problems that the idea of success creates for people, because we have this belief that we ought to be successful and we ought to be achieving something. And I think, maybe if you go into football management and you're Jose Mourinho or whoever, you can point to the trophies on the shelf and you can say, look, I'm successful. But then if you lose your next 6 matches, are you still successful?
Mm.
And I remember when I was much younger than I am now, reading about Kingsley Amis talking about waking up after he'd written Lucky Jim, after it was published.
Mm.
Tremendous reviews, groundbreaking novel, the great English novel of its generation, extraordinary achievement, blah, 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 blah. And was he filled with elation and a feeling of done that, nailed it, I'm a success? No, he actually felt very depressed.
Really?
Because now, do it again.
Mm. Yeah.
Can you do it again? What does it mean to, and I think particularly for people who achieve success or fame, celebrity, and I think unfortunately that all those things get blurred now. The Kardashians are huge celebrities and very famous, They don't do anything. They have no talent for anything. And if you achieve that when you're young, you have a lot of life ahead of you when you may be looking back at something that defines you that you did a long time ago.
Yeah.
I think if you ask me to define myself, I'll tell you, I'm a massive underachiever.
Really? Goodness.
Um,
And I had to cut your introduction down because there's a lot more I could have put in it. So, that's amazing that you
I've
could
done
have.
a lot.
Yeah.
I've done a lot, and I've done a lot across a number of things. I'm doing a lot of audio book recording, and I've set up to record at home now, and that's taking up increasingly a lot of my time. But I'm waiting for it to start.
Really? That's crazy.
So I did theatre, but I never did the kind of level of theatre I feel I ought to have done. I did movies, but I've never done the level of movies that I feel I ought to have done. And I wrote a book, but I ought to have written more than one book, and I haven't. And,
Oh, I see. From the movies, they're some of the most famous movies.
Sure, absolutely, and
I
I don't run away from it at all, and I don't denigrate it, and I'm proud of it. And what I will accept is that I have made an indelible mark, not just in the history of horror movies, but in the history of cinema. That's fine, and I know that long after I've shuffled off the mortal coil, if people are still around to be talking about horror movies, they'll be talking about Hellraiser, and they'll be talking about me. That's there, and I do have a feeling of pride and achievement in that. And I suppose that's a definition of success. But it was success in that moment. When I was standing in front of the camera, doing whatever it was I was doing right when I was playing Pinhead, because clearly I seem to have been doing something right. At that moment, was I being successful, or was I just doing my job well? There are a lot of people who do their job well, day after day after day. But if you're a particularly conscientious garbage man, or a nurse, or a dental hygienist, or whatever it may be, you are doing your job well. You're making people happy. You're keeping the wheels of society turning. But nobody's congratulating you for it. Nobody's giving you awards for it. So I always very much have that perception in my head too. Perhaps because I'm naturally and instinctively a socialist, so I'm aware that everybody makes their contribution. But we have a kind of false sense of what success is, because it's pop stars and footballers and athletes and actors and writers and whoever it may be, and people on reality television.
Do you think success is ever achievable then? Do you think it's sort of this mystery state of momentary being, as you say, when you were in the movie at the time, doing your job well, you were successful in that moment? But do you think there's ever such a thing as permanent success?
Well, I think it's why the Kingsley Amis story made such an impression on me, because clearly at that point he was a huge success. His first novel had been published to extraordinary acclaim. But now he has to get beyond the moment of success and be an author again and start a new novel, and the fact that his last novel was successful is no guarantee that your next novel will also be successful. The notoriously difficult second album that bands have. You have your whole life to write your first album, and then you have maybe 6 months to put the second one out.
Mm.
I do think that to some extent, if you make the achievement of success your immediate goal, you are chasing the end of the rainbow, I think, to some extent. I guess it's easier if you're an athlete and your goal is to be the first person to run a mile in under 4 minutes, and you achieve that. That's success. If your aim is to represent your country at the Olympic Games and you achieve that, that's a success. If your aim is to win a medal, then good. And a bronze is okay, and a silver is fine, and the gold is wonderful. And then what happens the day after?
Yeah.
You start training for the next Olympics or the Commonwealth Games. And, so it's always moving on, I think, from point to point. There's no point where you can really, well, there shouldn't be any point where you sit down and you say, well, okay, that's it. I've done that. I'm a success.
I think there are people that do that, though. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that
success doesn't pay the bills. It's like there's a perception. Like I think people think if you've ever appeared in anyone who appears in movies is earning telephone numbers, and the truth is very far from that. And it is a hugely unforgiving industry. The numbers are quite terrifying, both for equity in the UK and for the Screen Actors Guild in this country. Something like 90% of the membership of the union is unemployed at any given moment.
Wow.
And approximately the same proportion of the membership is earning below £10,000, $10,000 a year.
Yeah. It's
not a forgiving industry to be in at all. Sorry, it's a long answer to a simple question.
I don't think it's a simple question. That's the thing.
No, deceptively simple question. And the short answer is, I have no idea what it is. Other people tell me I've achieved it. And I can point to lots of moments. I certainly, doing my book, I'd never done anything like that before. And I sat down and my publishers said, so how long will it take you to write 30,000 words or whatever it was going to be, longer than that, I think. And I said, I have no idea. You're terrifying me. And it was a scary thing. And it, right at the end, for the first and only time in my life, I developed nosebleeds because of the pressure of the whole thing. But I enjoyed doing it at the same time. The one-man show was the same thing. It was an idea that was suggested to me. I said yes in, I think, the spring, and I can't remember what year it was. And I knew I was going to be performing it in the autumn. I nearly said the fall. I've been here too long.
I was going to say, yeah.
And then he called me back a couple of months later and he said, okay, look, I need to start publicizing this. What's it called? It didn't exist, let alone have a title. So I said, it's called An Evening with Death. And put down the phone and called a close friend of mine who I'd worked with in the theatre for a number of years and said, I'm doing this one-man show, apparently, and it's called An Evening with Death. And I have about 6 months to make it happen. Will you help me? And she did. And we worked on putting it together, and she directed it, and it worked brilliantly. And that's it. So, and the same with the Pinhead experience thing that I did recently at conventions for fans. My partner Steph and I, we worked that up from the ground floor, from an idea to actually happening in slightly under a year.
Wow.
Again, a lot of pressure and a lot of, things going wrong and panic and tension and all the way right up till the last minute. And in the end, it was perfect. I wouldn't have changed anything about it in the execution of it. Those are moments of achievement and moments of satisfaction.
Yeah.
And I think those are more important, because the success bit is kind of something that somebody bestows on you from outside. But I know I can look back on those things and other things and say, I did that. I did that, and I did it well, and I'm pleased with it, and I'm proud of it. In the same way that, I think you can't talk about success, can you, without talking about failure?
Yeah. It's very unfashionable, of course, to talk about failure, isn't it? Because it's,
and what perceptions of failure are. And that I think sometimes we learn more from failing than we do from succeeding.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's how you pick yourself up from these things that really helps you define who you are. And
Yes.
It's from those moments that you learn what success means to you, because it's how you recover from failure. I think it's
well,
fascinating.
What's the Kipling line from If? Meet success and failure and treat those two imposters both the same.
Yes. No, I didn't know that one. That's a good one.
I think I'm probably paraphrasing wildly, but I think
the concept's perfect. Yeah, I really like that. So let's change gear slightly and sort of, obviously it's been a journey to where you are now, and whether success is something you feel or something someone else puts on you. We've all had our challenges, throughout however long our journey's been, and I'm sure you've had your own. If you could go back and talk to yourself at any stage in your life, when would you go back to, and what would you say?
I would go back to me as a teenager, when I was I sort of felt, or I feel that I was kind of on a conveyor belt of assumptions about academic success. I knew that I was going to go to this particular grammar school when I was a boy, which was conceit on my part, mixed with the fact that it was the school that John Lennon went to, and therefore I was going to go to that school as well, which I did. And then there was an assumption that I was going to go to university because I was going to be academically clever, which to a point I was, but only to a point, and there was really only one subject that I really genuinely excelled in, and that was English, language and literature, which should have been telling me something, I suppose. And then I got involved in doing school plays, which consumed me. And in rehearsal for the school plays, I met this guy called Clive Barker, who was at the same school, and that was fairly much a life-changing experience for me. I ended up going on to university to study English literature, and realized almost immediately that I didn't want to be sitting in seminars discussing Christopher Marlowe's Dr. Faustus. I wanted to play Mephistopheles.
I see.
And at the same time, this curious thing was happening to me where I was one of those annoying people who kind of sailed through exams at school without really paying them too much attention until I'd done my A-levels. And then exam anxiety dreams started. Once I'd done them, it was like my head said, okay, now that it's over, we can let all the terrors out that we weren't letting you acknowledge.
Yeah, it's the best way to do it, I suppose.
Except that I got to university and I couldn't write an essay to save my life.
Oh goodness!
I would literally look at a question and I'd say, well, I can answer this yes, no, or maybe, but I don't have anything else to say, and I don't have any motivation to say anything else. I don't have the motivation to play this game anymore, because I think I perceived it as that. I knew, I remember talking to my dad about this, because he got on my case, and I said, well, you know, look, in history, we're going to get a question about Luther and the Reformation. And they'll either ask us this question, or they'll ask us this question. And they're basically both the same question, in that I will trot out exactly the same information. I'll just spin it that way if it's that question, or that way if it's that question. But it's the same essay. So there's nothing, you know, there's... and I think he got infuriated, and I think he thought I was being very conceited, and I absolutely was. I would go back to the teenage me. I went to see plays in Liverpool at the Playhouse, and I thought actors were demigods.
Wow. Yeah.
But when they left the stage, they ceased to exist. I had no idea that you could do this as a job. You know, there were Hollywood stars and there were these creatures on the stage, but I had no conception that you could do this as a job. And I remember one of the head of English at Quarry talking to me after doing a play there, and he said, "You're very good, you know. You're very good." I said, "Oh, thank you." He said, "In particular, you know what to do with your hands." I had no idea what he was talking about, but it's hand acting is a problem. What do you do with your hands? Or you know, you just have them at your side because you're trying not to do anything with them. But nobody ever said to me, "Have you thought about doing this?" You know, there are things called drama schools. I didn't know that at all. Wow. So if I could, I think I would go back and say, look, don't be silly. There's only one thing that you're actually any good at of all the things you've tried to do. There's only, you know, you would have loved to have been the captain of Liverpool Football Club, but unfortunately you're crap at playing football. You would have loved to open bowling for England, but unfortunately you're not that good. I was a decent cricketer, but I was not that good.
Not good enough.
But there's this one thing that fulfills you absolutely and you're outstandingly good at. So maybe it'd be a good idea if you did it. So don't go to university, go to drama school. Wow. I mean, as it turned out, by a tangled route, because I dropped out of university after 2 terms, which was hugely popular at home, as you can imagine.
Bet, yeah.
It was the early 70s. Dropping out was the thing to do. Yeah. And I was very much by that time already in Clive's orbit, and a group of friends who'd all kind of constellated together, and we started doing our own crazy experimental theatre in Liverpool, and then subsequently in London, and that eventually led to Hellraiser. But it was a tangled and problematic road to tread. The irony is that also now, in a lot of ways, I wouldn't change anything.
I was going to ask that. Yeah,
that was my drama school.
Yeah,
and I learned a completely different, I learned about acting in completely different ways, from left field and right field and all kinds of directions. I made my mistakes in public. I learned on the job. And I mean, I think I was in my mid-20s. We were doing in the Dog Company, which was the company of which Clive and I were co-founders, along with other people. We'd come down to London. We were doing a play called The History of the Devil, which was a wonderful play. I was playing the devil, big fat part. I was on stage nearly all the time. It was a big challenge.
Yeah.
And I was just absolutely adoring every single second of it. And that was the point at which I think for the first time I thought, oh, I guess this is what I'm going to do then.
Wow. Yeah.
And so at that point I was faced with the possibility of then going to drama school, which I could have done. But I was, if you like, arrogant enough to say, well, at this point, do I want to go back to square one and have somebody else tell me how they think I ought to do this? I think I'm as good as many and better than some. I might have that on my headstone, actually.
That's a good one, that one, yeah.
Yes, I've just come up with that.
There we go.
What did I just say?
I've got it on recording, don't worry.
As good as many, better than some. So I decided, no, I'm just going to keep on plowing down this furrow and see where it takes me.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because as well, in a lot of ways, you almost had on-the-job training. You took that route, of to acting rather than the classical route of have someone else tell you how to act. And for me, I think that's probably what makes your acting more genuine, because it's of you rather than of a style that someone's told you need to.
How to be an actor.
Yeah, you've not been told this is what you do with your hands when you are thinking this, and this is, and that kind of thing. It's just natural to you. So I think.
Yes, I mean, I had some regrets in that direction as well, because what you do get with a drama school training is a solid technical training.
Yeah.
And my technical training has all been self-taught. And as such, I'm still aware of deficiencies in it, but I probably would be anyway.
Nobody's perfect. That's the problem. I think we all have things to learn. Doug, it's been a pleasure. For our last question, I ask the same question of everybody. So here at Triple H Coaching, our motto is that we're science-based coaching for people who want more. And
science-based coaching?
For people who want more out of life.
Science-based.
So a lot of what we do is based on the scientific research I've done around neurology and using your primal instincts to help you with motivation and things like that. So the pleasure-pain principles. We use a little bit of mathematics to help people find out where they're at. This is all a great plug for the book that's coming out in the 5th of May. So thank you very much, which covers all of this in more depth. But so I like to base things on things that I can point to and say, here's my evidence as to why this works, rather than this is. I'm a scientist. I don't do airy-fairy. So that's why we say science-based. But it's
don't do airy-fairy. I like that.
It's a bit ironic for me, really, isn't it? It's it's the people who want more piece that I'm curious about. That you come from a very different story than everybody else that I've spoken to.
Yes.
The question is, if somebody came to you and said, I want more out of my life, what would your advice be? It's a hard question, I know.
I think every, obvious answer, I suppose. Every person is unique, and every person's story is unique, and every person's journey up to the point at which they're saying that is unique. So the question has to be, why? Why do you want more out of your life, and what do you want more out of? What's lacking in your life? For some people, it is exactly, I've got all the success in the world. I've got all the fame, I've got all the trappings, I've got all the money, I've got the mansion, I've got the cars, I've got the da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And inside, I feel as though I have nothing.
Exactly. Yep.
So, and I want more out of my life. So, and some people, who just have a dead-end job, which, they do, and it pays the bills and it puts food on the table, and and every day is the same, and every week is the same, and before long every year is the same. I want more out of my life, and I would not have any grand advice to give to anybody in that situation without hearing and understanding the story first. Story is, I mean, it's relevant to acting, I suppose. Story is all important. Yeah. Story is everything. We write the story of our lives. And the point at which I suppose we feel as though somebody else is writing the narrative for us is the point at which we're going to feel, no, now wait a minute.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what I would say is if you point to the number of times that people start their rise to success and achievement and a sense of fulfillment from a point of having fallen off a cliff. The point at which they lose their job, lose their marriage, lose their house, whatever it may be, or they take on more, and they take on more, and they take on more, because a lot of the time I think we feel that that's what successful is. Yeah, I can do that. Yes, I can do that. Of course I can do that. I'll do that. And then you reach the point where you're sitting down and saying, I can't do all this. I can't do this. But I can't admit I can't do this, because admitting you can't do something is admitting failure.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I've been there myself, I have to admit.
But very often it is the point at which, I suppose it's the old truism that addicts and people who are in very profound breakdown can't begin the recovery process until they've hit rock bottom. Yeah. Once you've hit rock bottom and you know you have no further to fall, there's only one way to go from there, and that's up. And that's the point at which I think very often people suddenly find, oh, I never thought of doing that before. Maybe I'll do that. Things happen by accident all the time too. Yeah. So, planning is, I've always said this about acting, that, you finish one job and people say, what would you like to do next? Something that pays. And if you sat down and made a list of 100 things you'd like to do next, when the phone rings, guarantee it will be, I apologize. I guarantee it will be the 101st that you didn't think about.
Exactly.
Sorry again, another long answer, but I wouldn't feel that I could offer a carved in stone answer, and I don't think carved in stone answers to these kind of metaphysical dilemmas that people have when they phrase the question, I want more out of my life. That might involve an inward journey as much as a change of direction outwardly. Both are perfectly valid, but it's...
And I think that's brilliant advice in itself, that you need to stop and take stock of your journey so far and work out what more means to you. I think that's perfectly valid advice, I think.
And is it part of Polonius's advice to Hamlet? To thine own self be true.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think
because truth is more important than success.
I couldn't agree more, and I think that links up very nicely with the thought of what is success, and it's, I think, being true to yourself is one of them, and why, as you described, these people who have millions and billions of pounds and all the cars and models hanging off their arms and everything they ever wanted are miserably unhappy a lot of the time, because
it'd be nice to get to that point.
Oh yeah, it'd be wonderful. I'm not going to complain, but I've always. Yeah, I'll be miserable in my large jet and hot tub. It's fine. But I think money's an enabler. It's not something that will
Yes.
make you happy. It gives you the ability to put yourself in situations that will make you happy. Doug, I want to say a huge thank you for taking time out of your chaotic schedule and to speak with me. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm sure there will be lots of questions come in and lots of excited people to see this. I can think of one author that will be fangirling her way over this video right now. So I will let her know.
Hi to you, whoever you are.
Her name is Laura Jane Clements, and she's a great author of travel blogs and travel books, etc. All on a geek theme. She's amazing. So big plug for Laura Jane.
Okay, well, and thank you. And I hope all that is useful somehow.
Fantastic, really fascinating, I have to say, and it's great to see a different perspective, on things and your journey. I think, as I say, I still think people will say you're a success, but I like your perspective that success is something that's put on you rather than something you necessarily do yourself. Great to speak to you. Have an enjoyable rest of your day and stay in touch.
I will. All right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.